Welcome back to Working Faith, where we take a spiritual approach to career success. I'm your host, Jalen Isley, and today I'm excited to introduce Pablo, who will share his perspective on spirituality and leadership. So Pablo is a 32-year-old professional with over 10 years of experience in institutional and corporate communications. He holds a master's degree in institutional communications and public affairs, and he's led the public and government affairs department for a New York Stock Exchange listed company. Communication, both written and spoken, topped with the right strategy to hit your target is what he does best. Words are his craft, and he can help us, all of us, find the perfect wording to reach our professional goals. So Pablo, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. So glad to be here as well. And thank you for taking me. And thanks also for the intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have worked with Pablo in the past, and I can assure you, the way that he can, literally take whatever project you have and just kind of bring it to life in a fresh, new, engaging way, is really inspiring. So I reached out to Pablo to see if he'd be interested in joining us for the show. And talk a little bit more about how his spirituality actually influences his ability to be successful in his career. So really excited to jump into things, Pablo.
Okay.
The show is all about, leveraging your spiritual principles or your faith to positively impact your workspace and grow your career. So let's talk about your spiritual journey. I know you identify as a spiritual person. How has your faith or belief system shaped who you are today?
Okay. It's quite a long story, but I'll try to start at the beginning. On papers, I was raised as a Christian, although currently I don't identify myself longer with all the typical dogmas that the church not imposes, perhaps it's not the right word, but it teaches or expects followers to follow. And I've been always very much in touch with my spiritual side since I was born through a set of diverse experiences that perhaps were or could be labeled as non-traditional. But later in my life, I started to kind of repress that aspect because you know how society sometimes pulls you into the typical social arena, and you have to fit in certain places like on school, on university, and then you start engaging in all these sorts of activities that society or the world expects either from a teenager or from a young adult man. And usually those activities start to force you to branch out from spirituality as you go into adulthood, to put it in some manner. And well, nowadays with social media and all these kinds of even more pulling activities, spirituality has been kind of left aside. So up until I was 27 years, I didn't want to have anything to do with spirituality because I finally was able to find my small place in the world. I had my job, my career, I had my girlfriend, and everything was running smoothly until up until a certain point, I went through a rough patch of, I'd say 2 years in a row where it perfectly fits what many spiritual teachers label as the dark night of the soul, where everything goes sideways. No matter what you do, nothing seems to go the right way. Everything fails. Either relationships are broken, jobs are lost, all your attempts are for nothing. And you start saying, okay, how long is this actually going to last? Or what am I supposed to do? And luckily, that's in that span of 2 years, in a nutshell, I lost my life savings. I lost my business. I lost my corporate job, which I voluntarily quitted to do my own business. But then both failed and I got left with nothing. I remember at that point in time, I also lost my girlfriend. which luckily then we we got back together. But I got stripped away from all these false identities or false egoic things that I used to self-identify myself. Like, when you ask someone that is already retired, like, okay, who you are or what you do, they don't respond to you in present time. They tell you, oh, I used to be a CEO of this company, or I used to be a manager. It's kind of a sense where they pull their own identity from the things, from vanity things, what position they held, how much they are worth, or, who they are professionally. And even though that is important, it is far from the true essence that lays beneath every single one of us. And going through that rough patch made me realize that there is much more to life and to what one truly is. And that kind of got me back in touch with my spiritual side. And then I started a really steep and intense journey of reconnecting with that part of myself. And that implied starting to delve into meditation, self-awareness, reading tons of books that sometimes they are wrongly categorized as self-help, but I like to call it more like spiritual awareness books, even though that's not a real category, at least on Amazon, I believe. And fast forward 3 years from that point onwards, I'm here. And the most important thing I can tell about this is that everything that happened to me that at that point seemed like horrible and extremely bad and worrisome forced me into finding myself and getting back in touch with myself. So it kind of makes a full circle throughout time, even though you may not see it at that point.
Yeah, life is funny that way. Like it takes you through so many different experiences only to bring you back to your true self. I'm a firm believer that we're actually born, knowing our true selves. And then, we encounter our parents and our family members and the environment. And there are just so many different things that can impact our spirits. And you're right. You get to a point where all of it just kind of falls apart. And somehow that allows you to return to your true self and grow to the next level. What are a few of the core principles of your spiritual beliefs that resonate the most with you?
Okay. I try to be as agnostic as possible. And I don't even like to refer to God as God, because God has been kind of trademarked by most religions, up to a point that many people believe that there are different gods. And I like to talk or to think about that as the main source of awareness or consciousness, where everything spans from. And by everything, I don't even mean like the world we see here being alive, like truly everything. I mean, the endless corners of the unexplored universe in all its fashion, right? So understanding or recognizing that as the main source, and us, humans as a kind of a fractal of that main source, it is one of the central things that I use as my spiritual beliefs. And I know the word fractal may seem perhaps tricky or hard to understand, but it strictly relates to many studies in sacred geometry, where they state like the physical world is built up upon from very basic geometrical shapes that can be found either in sound patterns, wave patterns, how things are built both at the molecular level, which many call the microcosms, and at the galactic level, which many call the macrocosms, and how those things paradoxically have very much in common mathematically wise. And that's why fractal, what it means is that on a very specific level, the way we are built or how things unravel in our lives are very much connected to how they work elsewhere, even though we may not now know where is that elsewhere, how to get there or how it actually looks like. But yeah, that would be the main thing.
Interesting. How do you, so let's relate that to your career. You know, as a result of your spiritual beliefs, what professional values have you developed over time that connect to those beliefs?
Right. Okay. Perhaps it can be looked from perhaps some specific situations, and using law as an example, it is sometimes very interesting when sometimes law states that if you are on one side of the law, it is correct, and you are on the other side of the law, it is wrong. And they only label your physical actions and sometimes your intentions when there are some things that are premeditated. But what I learned that is extremely valuable as a leader or for leadership generically is that you have to go deeper into who's behind the other person that either you are doing business with or that is involved in your team, or that they may be, I don't know, a partner or someone working for you, and not take everyone for their face value or for, I don't know, their obvious skills. And this is another extremely important fact for recruiters, people that are trying to find the right people for some specific jobs. And there's a very interesting thing that, at least perhaps I'm biased and it happened to me because I do believe that it works, and it wouldn't work for someone that doesn't believe it works. But when you start connecting, even though there may be a business in the middle, with someone else, acknowledging that other person as a person with a set of values, with basically another soul alike as yourself or as one, the response shifts, and there's kind of a deeper connection that is built kind of in a grateful way, because at some level, the other person is able to sense or vibe that it is being acknowledged at that deeper level. And that's how most meaningful relationships are built. And that's one of the key ingredients, in my own personal opinion, not even professional opinion, because this goes much deeper than the professional realm. That's one of the main ingredients to get success. And also accepting that success may not look like we think it should look, which is another thing on its own. But most things I could say that, okay, yeah, I succeeded. This turned out fine. That is the approach I took, both with myself and with other people involved.
Interesting. So you're saying that when you're from a professional standpoint, and not even just professional, just like on a human soul level, you know, like when you acknowledge that there's another soul here that comes from the same main source, you know, we talked about God earlier and God being, you know, essentially the main source of everything. So you're saying that when you acknowledge that other person comes from that same main source, you connect with, you're able to establish meaningful relationships and connect on a different level that actually leads to a successful outcome with that person.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And perhaps it's easier because sadly, there are more people that go the other way instead of this way, which is seeing people as assets. In fact, the whole terminology of human resources, I mean, it really sucks. I mean, we are much more than resources or numbers on a spreadsheet, but you can, I mean, it's a game of polarities. You can see at the other face of the same coin. When people treat others as if they were just a tool in their team, and they may get results sometimes, but they don't last for long. Or either people leave, or they are very chaotic environments, or those people end up going through a great deal of self-produced drama or torment, and it doesn't just work out healthily. There is no balance there.
Right. No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense there. And that's the key. You know, what I'm hearing from this is, you know, another spiritual belief that you anchor to is balance. You know, you've got to have this balanced approach, or even, you know, proactively looking for that balance in a relationship or in an encounter or a professional goal like that. Seeking out that balance and the role that you play in bringing that balance forth seems to be really important too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is critical. And sometimes, I mean, the most funny situations unravel when you try to approach anything, whether in business or in life, from this angle. You find like the wrong people getting self-ejected because they can't stand being with you. And perhaps the right people just showing up because of all unexplained consequences. And it's kind of, you don't even have to work to find that balance. If you find that balance within yourself, it kind of strangely replicates outwards with business, with personal projects, and everything.
Yeah,
and
that makes
the more you
No,
sorry.
No, finish.
The more you start seeing that it actually works, the more that it starts to happen throughout your entire life.
That makes perfect sense. You start to attract more of that balance, and
right.
Yeah. And to your point earlier, the definition of success, or what success looks like, starts to change as you, one, anchor to the main source, two, recognize that another person is coming from that same source, and three, making sure that you're operating from a place of balance and attracting that same energy so that you can actually achieve results in your career.
Right.
You know, that makes perfect sense. That makes so much sense. So tell me specifically, you know, we're talking about leadership today. Can you share an example of a leadership challenge in which you relied on these spiritual principles to guide your behavior?
Right. This perhaps may be a counter example, but I've been keen to leave places early on, thanks to trying to apply to my leadership all the things that we've been discussing, and by them getting rejected by everyone. And I'm going to explain a little better. I had the opportunity to work for very specific projects, and one startup in particular, where, you know, you try to do things like the right way, or the way you think they should be done, by applying these spiritual values to either your peers, to your boss and superiors, to your team, to your customer. And yet everything seemed to massively fail. I mean, there was like not even the slightest room for accepting these types of methodologies, or sometimes, I mean, you can't walk up to anyone and just start talking about spirituality, because you can get like mislabeled that, I mean, this guy is really crazy. I mean, we lost him. So just to stay professional and prevent that kind of image casting, some things were kind of disguised as pep talks, or talks more oriented to what the employee or the collaborator is going through personally, and try to drop one or two advices. And in this particular place, everything seemed to go sideways. There was not even room, or these things got totally rejected. And also the company results were terrific. I mean, on paper, like the KPIs, the books, customer performance, everything did not even suck, but it was getting worse month over month. And then people started to get very upset, and we talked every single day with the owner, and he was living a complete different movie. Like if he was, going to a Disney park every single day, like everything was great. Our Instagram followers count is upwards, which is a number that had nothing to do with if the business was truly succeeding or not. And at those points, I kind of faced two different decisions of my old self and my new self. My old self would have stayed there and bring war to the startup, like fight every single thing, leave everything at the smallest issue, trying to get it the right way, or at least how I thought it should be, trying to convince others, like doing this very sickening internal lobby, just because you are on the grip of things and you just cannot let one single thing be lost or be done the wrong way. And this was one of the major first times that I said, okay, I'm going to just release everything. So let them be. This is clearly not the right place for me, because this situation I talked just a few seconds ago, that would be like the office impact. But that then had an out of office impact when I got back home, that it was horrific, because I was with my head like beating all the time. Perhaps I was, I don't know, watching a movie with my girlfriend, but my head was wrapped up in this thing that we couldn't solve. Or I can't believe he said that to me, or how does a CEO think this way? And then I try to take a little perspective, which can be hard sometimes, and say, isn't this a message that this is not the right place for me? And that's when I kind of pulled out. And the strangest thing happened when I explained some of my coworkers my reasons for leaving. At least 2 or 3 of them also left, because it was like this very same thing that everyone was feeling, no one was talking about, but just because being addicted to be in the grip of things, they just wearing themselves out, giving these meaningless battles for a business that wasn't even ours. We were managers for that company. Mm-hmm. So that's when I said, okay, this might be the right approach to also apply in other things.
Interesting. So when we're talking about leadership, you said so many different interesting things there. And I'm doing my best to just kind of narrow it down to a couple that stood out to me. So you're saying that your spirituality helped you shift your perspective. And in the past, you may have taken the approach to, just fight against everything. But as your spirituality grew and deepened, you anchoring to your own principles helped you be a stronger leader, not just of yourself, but as an example to others, to know when to release something and let it go. The concept of release or the principle of release isn't something we often talk about in the world of business. Everything is like, I just got to fight for it until I get the results. And sometimes a strong sign of leadership is knowing when to just release something and allow the right environment, allow the right people, allow the right results to come to you, as opposed to trying to like beat it or fight it or try to construct it yourself. No, I think that is, I think that's really powerful and something that a strong leader can teach his or her team, in terms of when to just release something and let it go, and allow the right opportunities to come. So I want to know, like you talked about how stressful that situation was, and it was even, following you home. What are some of the practices you use today to maintain your spiritual health and well-being?
Right. I piled up quite a few rituals that perhaps rituals they have not a positive connotation, but the practices that I take them from already existing practices, but I tweak them throughout time to my own likings, to put it in some manner. First of all, it's plain basic meditation.
Okay.
What I do is kind of a transcendental meditation, but more linked to what Eckhart Tolle refers as presence. Sorry about the noise. As presence and getting in touch with yourself, which can be from just one meaningful breath up to, I don't know, half an hour of getting your eyes closed and trying to reconnect with yourself, like feeling your own feel of energy, feeling your body, your breathing. That's very vanilla plain, but it is one of the most powerful anchors that one can build, in my own opinion.
I think that vanilla plain is the best way to go in so many situations. We can, especially, you know, when people are exploring their spirituality for the first time, like they just want to try to take on so many different things and trends and you know, the I call them oldies but goodies, you know, the ancient wisdom of just meditating and being present, just I feel like can even cure cancer sometimes. Like it's just
indeed.
It's so powerful, and it's always the most simple things that build such a strong foundation. Even in geometry, I mean, you talked about the fractals. Even the simple structures that build a strong foundation. Yeah. So I think that's really powerful. And meditation is something that we could all use more often. So with that in mind, you know, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. I just want to know, I just have one more question for you.
Sure.
You know, when we think about leadership, and we think about some of the spiritual principles that you've shared today, what's one simple thing that people can use in their upcoming work week to strengthen their leadership skills from a spiritual standpoint?
Okay. It looks simple, but it may not be simple to apply it. But stay present and not only take, but live every single thing at its due time in the present. Don't think about it beforehand, and don't get stuck to it after it goes away. That can make everything much more simple. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, folks, you heard it. Stay present in the moment. The past is already done and the future is unavailable. You know, like stay present right here in the moment, and show up as a leader in different ways. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. How can people connect with you or learn more about the great work you're doing?
Okay. You can learn more about me through LinkedIn, which the handle is Paul mid dash, I believe, DC. You can look at me by Paul Di Cio or Pablo Di Cio, which is my complex name or surname.
No worries. And we'll make sure we'll have a link to your profile in the show notes.
Thanks.
All right. Great. Well, thank you all for listening to Working Faith. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes, information about our guest Pablo, and link to submit your career questions can actually be found on the website, workingfaith.com. Remember to subscribe, rate, and share the show with others. I'd love to hear your comments. You can find Pablo on LinkedIn. You can also find me on LinkedIn by joining the Working Faith group, and we can continue this conversation on leadership, staying present, and releasing anything that is not meant for you. So thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with more tips on how you can take a spiritual approach to your career success and work your faith. Good day.